Right, course objectives. I won't go through this again. Let me just get to the point of where we are in terms of modules. So we are now on module 3 about improving productivity in critical operations, picking, lifting, packing, dispatch using activity sampling. So this week we're going to talk about a technique called activity sampling, and then we're going to follow it up next week with some detail about some problem solving techniques. So we're on this module 3 at the moment. Since I last saw you, you've cracked through about another 6 sessions, which is great. So we all know how to do some waste walks, identify some wins, get some problem, and it's great to hear how the projects are progressing. Yeah, and can completely understand and empathize with all of a sudden everyone's got busy, and so these things become harder to implement. But it's good that you've all had some great progress. That was really good to hear. So yeah, so we're on this module 3 talking about activity sampling today. We'll then go into something called problem solving next time, and then we'll talk about measurements and something called short interval controls. I think from what you said today, activity sampling actually comes at quite a good time. It's also good to do this exercise, particularly when you're in high production rates, because you're seeing the true way of people working. So I think you've covered this, Neil. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about standard ops or anything.
This is what we covered last time, which was really just getting you to think about how you capture best practice. And I think it really just builds on the conversation we've had at the start of today's session, which is once you start to identify what is best practice, what is it that sets apart a quick picker from somebody who works at a lower rate. How do you capture that best practice, and then how do you then use it to transfer those skills? So we've been circulating to you after each session. We've been circulating to you something called a standard operation document, which really is just a way of documenting step by step how you go about doing something. So we've been giving you our version of a standard op for how to do a waste walk, how to do a process map, how to do a prioritization matrix. And really, I think it's down to each individual business just to really sort of like try and develop their own version of a standard op. Some businesses do it in Word documents. Some businesses prefer to do a video. Some businesses do step-by-step guides using pictures, or a combination of those 3 elements. So it's just last time we spoke about thinking how you're going to capture this best practice and then use it then to train other people. So really, it's down to you guys just to think that through, to work out what works best for you and for the people that you've got within the business, and then just use that then to roll out the ideas that you've got for encouraging people to work at the best rates.
Excellent, thanks, Neil.
No problem.
So let's talk a bit more about today's session then. So we're going to enable you to understand how to do some detailed analysis of individuals' work and process steps. So this takes a slightly different view than the waste walk, although it identifies some of the similar things. So we're going to talk about why it's important. I'll give you an introduction. We're going to try a quick exercise, which, I'm being honest, I've not run over the internet and the web, and it's got a video in it. So this could be exciting in terms of whether it works or not. Then we'll talk about how you plan to do it, how you then interpret the results, and then there'll be a bit of a summary and a call to action at the end of that. So first off, so why do we do it? So what we see with doing the waste walk and the process map, you're seeing it through the process lens. So you're really sort of looking at how the process works, and you probably follow one individual of how they're working. What you don't see is all of the things around the edges that happen. So all of the things that are not to do with process, and also, as Neil says, some of that real detail about how people are doing things slightly differently. So this works particularly well in those high volume areas. So where we're seeing, for example, I've got an EG there of the 2 ones we've talked about a lot today around picking, packing, is where we can see that small level of detail and small improvements that can give a significant benefit. And if we go back to the fact that, if lots and lots of people are doing the same activity, making those small adjustments, those small changes can have quite a big benefit. And it also helps you understand the reasons for variance. So you can start to see, well, what's the difference between picker or packer A and picker or packer C? So I think this is what Neil was talking about in terms of why it's important to do this, is to see some of this variances. So I think I might have done during our first session, brought this slide up before. This is where people were sticking into trays during our first phase of doing these lean workshops on SmartHorts, and the numbers are the speeds that people achieved in the period of time of the video. So a small difference for some, but actually if you look at the fastest, which in the period of time did 23 things, and the slowest, who stuck 11, it's a significant difference. In fact, that's double the amount of time. So when you look at this in terms of the potential that has, if you've got a team of 40, which is what the sort of size of this team was, and they were able to all move up to the next quartile. So sometimes what we try and do, which sometimes makes it very hard, is think, well, the fastest person is going at 23, therefore actually everyone needs to go at 23. Now, I think that's a good aspiration, but in the first instance, it's just worth thinking about, can we get the person on this slide here who's at 11 to be up into the sort of 15 to 18, because that would be a stepped improvement. And can we get the 15 to 18s to start to go towards the fastest? And if we did that in this example, we'd see a 20% productivity improvement if only half of them were able to move up that quartile. So there's significant benefit of making some tweaks to these processes. And even with the highest performer, there's still opportunity for improvements. I have this video. I just wasn't quite sure if I could show it, but maybe in the future we'll show it and you can see the differences. Because as Neil says, it's very much about how they hold and orientate, and how they have the things to stick close to hand. So the person up in that top left-hand corner was not making a lot of movements at all, and they're able to achieve quite a faster rate, although looking at the video it doesn't look like they're sort of sweating or doing anything harder. It's just about how they set themselves up. So let's talk about how we do activity sampling then. So activity sampling determines the frequencies within a work system by taking samples through observation. So traditionally how we used to look at people working, is we'd stand there with a stopwatch and try and time everything they did. But it's really difficult to do accurately, and it's really hard to do in terms of getting that level of accuracy and getting that level of detail. So actually what comes with activity sampling is a simpler way of doing that. So we take a snapshot every 10 seconds of what people are doing. It doesn't have to be 10 seconds, but we find in areas where there's a high volume and lots of activity, 10 seconds works well. So what you're doing is you're looking at 10-second intervals and taking a snapshot of what you see people doing. And you just mark on a tally sheet what it is that person has been doing at that point that you looked at them. So if you can imagine you're observing one or a few people, you set your stopwatch going at 10 seconds, you take a snapshot of what they're doing. You then try and look away, so you're not trying to second guess what the next thing will be. And at the end of that second 10 seconds, you look again and see exactly at that point, what were they doing? And you mark it down on the tally sheet. And you keep doing this until you've gone through a period of time. I think in most cases, the longer period of time, the better the statistical validation of the data. But we tend to think about 20 to 30 minutes is a good study. So this is what the activity sampling template looks like. So it's a fairly simple thing with the activities along the top. We've got some pre-filled ones here, and the operator number name down the left-hand side. So we've got walking, waiting, picking up, putting down, inspection, orientation, talk to supervisor, rework, and operation. And we've left some spaces on this one for people to add things. Because what you want to do if you're doing this across numerous people is obviously you want the categories to be the same. So we're going to have a quick go at observing a video and see if you can tell me what you think they're doing at each point. So the video will stop every 10 seconds. Now the video will stop every 10 seconds, but it will depend on the speed of the internet and everything, whether it will take 10 seconds or 20 or 30. So I'm then going to ask you what they think they're doing, and then I'm going to start to fill in the activity sample template on your behalf. So we'll then gradually create what is the total percentage of time they're doing each type of activity. Okay, so there's 7 people on here. How many have we've got 6, haven't we? So I'll take one. So I'm going to go round and you're each going to have a person. Is that okay? Is that clear? So this video will run for 10 seconds and then it's going to stop. And then I want you to have a look at what your person is doing at that snapshot in time, and we will fill in the template on that basis. So here goes. Fingers crossed that it works. Right, sorry, I didn't also tell you what they were doing. They're making product out of Lego, is what they're doing. So has everyone spotted their person of where they now are and what they're doing?
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Right. So number 1, Neil.
He was waiting.
Waiting. Okay. Number 2.
I was like waiting, but also like I passed a paper, so I'm not sure what she's doing. She had a paper, passed it on to a lady, but then she was just waiting mostly.
Yeah, I think probably waiting is fair enough.
Yeah.
So so we now got Alex as number 3. Alex, do you know?
Was it inspecting?
Let's have a look. Looks a bit like inspecting, doesn't it? So let's go with inspecting. So number 4, which is...
I think we had a pretty easy task because I don't think our guy did do much. He was looking around, but not much for production. So I think he was just, I don't know, looking what the other was doing. We might have spoken with the supervisor, but not much in terms of activity, I would say.
Yeah, so I would say he was just probably waiting, wasn't he, for something to do, I would assume.
Yeah.
So Nancy, number 5.
Yeah, well, I wasn't quite sure what he was doing. I think he had just received a new lot of Lego and he just put his hands over the top of them.
Okay. So he might have been orientating them, mightn't he? He might have been doing that, just has something different rather than waiting. Should we go for that?
Okay.
And then we've got James for number 6.
Yeah, it was a bit unclear, well, what he was doing, but he just basically walked from one end of the table to the other. So walking.
Sounds like walking, doesn't it?
So.
And then number 7, I think is just doing some. Yeah, I think again it's just probably waiting. Okay, let's see how they then get on after that. So, what do we think they're doing now? So, Neil, what do you think your guy's doing?
It looks like he's waiting to put the tray down.
So, Virginia?
And what, suppose she got the instructions passed on and she was going to start building something?
Yeah. So I think so. As she seems to have started to take the things out of the cup, she's probably orientating those products. Do you think?
Possibly, yeah.
Number 3, Alex.
She counted a load of stuff, then picked them up. So I'm not sure if that was orientation or pick up, put down.
Let's go for a change of pick up, put down. Um, 4.
That's us. So our guy was still waiting. So right at the end of the video, he was about to receive that cup, but until there, he was still waiting.
Yeah. So, and the important thing with this is it's at the point of the 10 seconds. So at the point of the 10 seconds here, you're right. He was about to see. So he looks like he's got his hand on the cup, doesn't it? So he's probably about to orientate it or pick it up, something like that. Yeah. So shall we go with? We'll say he was picking up. 5. Who was 5? Sorry, Nancy.
I think he's just about to pick something up.
Okay.
He just started to pick something up. He sort of looked around and then he put his hand in as though he was going to pick something up. I don't think it's been made yet, though. So.
No, we've not got a lot on other than that operation side yet, have we? So if I've put that in the wrong place, haven't I? So number 5 was pick up, put down. Thanks, Nancy. And number 6, James.
Pick up and put something down. You got something from one side of the table, picked it up and then put it down on the other side.
And is that what he's doing at this precise second, though?
Say this precise second, he's waiting.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing to do, and this is why it's useful to do the look away. I'm showing this video because it's easy to start to preempt what people are doing, rather than saying actually at that absolute point of 10 seconds, what did they do? What did they do? So number 7, she looks like she's waiting again. So I think we'll do one more. Maybe we'll see if someone actually is making something. Oh. So I've not put the numbers on this time. So number 1, can people remember who they had? Number 1, I think there's this guy here, wasn't it, on the top left?
Yeah,
Neil.
that's me. Neil, he's putting down.
Yeah. Number 2, which is Virginia.
Me, yes. Would you be picking it, or I'm not sure because she had it in her hand and just passing it on, but I don't know with that class as talking to this. I don't know if Neil, if number 1 was the supervisor. So yeah, not sure.
Yeah. I think it's a pickup, I would say, looking at that picture.
Yes. Okay, I'll pick up then.
We'll go for that. We'll go for that. Okay, number 3, which is the lady in the black with the glasses. Alex?
I missed the first half, but I think when it came through, she was inspecting.
Okay. So, guys at Place UK, what did you think about? So this is this guy, isn't it?
Yeah. So if we assume that the guy with the green t-shirt is the supervisor, he was talking to the supervisor at the end of this 10 seconds.
Okay. Okay, and number 5, Nancy?
He looks similar to what he was doing last time, really. So looking like he's just about to pick something up.
See, I thought he was. Do we think he might be making something? Did he have Lego in his hand, Nancy?
Well, he sort of leaned back and spoke to somebody, and then, yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He's definitely got something in his hand, I think. Yeah.
I think we have to have someone who's made something. So I'm going to put him down as operation. James?
I'd say he's still waiting, I think.
Still waiting. And then, and my person, I think, was still waiting as well. So that's how you do an activity sample. But the important things to remember, and then we'll talk about what the results show here. The important things to remember is to only take at that snapshot. And so I think, as I said in the instructions, to do that look away and look back again, because otherwise you do start to preempt things. So it's a really good thing to put your head down and not look at them. Look at your watch, and when 10 seconds happens, look up and look at the person that you're observing. And then you will get a snapshot of what they're doing, because you were doing, and I deliberately didn't labor the point, but you were doing what's easy to do in these things, which is preempt what people are doing. So you can see across here that then we're starting to have something around the percentage of time that people are doing things. So if you imagine you did this over a longer period of time, it becomes more valid. But what it starts to give you is the pattern of the time it takes people and what activities they're doing. So the things you would look at in this process potentially is there's a lot of waiting and there's a lot of picking up and putting down, and trying to understand, well, what could you do about those two things? Because they are, what's that, 60–70% of the time is spent doing those types of things. And it will give you a rough estimate over a period of time what those types of activities they are. As I say, this is only a very, very small snapshot, but it gives you an estimate of how the time is distributed. And I think in my experience, and hopefully Neil will back this up, is that this actually becomes more accurate, I think, than actually doing the stopwatch and actually timing people saying they're doing this activity, etc., etc. This kind of takes away a bit of our sort of bias of what people are doing. So it gives you a more accurate estimate of what time is taken. The other thing is you can look across operators and say, well, who is doing things, who's waiting more, who's spending more time picking up and putting down. So you would say operator 1 was spending more time waiting, operator 7 was spending all their time waiting. We'll look at the star, who actually had some operational activity in it. They did some, but again, if you can start to see the differences between people. Does that all make sense in terms of the way you do it? I'll talk you through more about the way you do it, but that's what you're trying to get to, a level of data and information that says we can start to see across a team or across some individuals, what's the percentage of time people are spending doing different types of activity. Any questions? I had a go at doing this before I started, so I took a slightly different slant on it, and the video was working slightly better. So that's what you end up with from your activity sample. Okay, let's carry on then. So 4 stages to doing this: planning and setting up the activity, completing the activity sample, analyzing the data, and action planning. So we're going to go through each of these in turn. So first of all, planning and undertaking the activity sampling. So the best thing to do with these is to take a piece of paper. So I certainly would encourage you to do what I just did then, which was to fill in a spreadsheet as you go. The easiest way to do it is to use 5-bar gates and do it on a piece of paper. The other thing you need to do when you're planning this is obviously speak to the people that you're going to observe, to give them some valid reasons of why you're doing it, to look for opportunities for improvement, to see if different ways of picking result in faster picking or not, and try and ask them always to do what they would normally do. People being observed lots of times will behave in a different way. often they'll go quicker or do things they wouldn't do normally. But what you want to see is actually what happens in real life, not what just happens at a point of being observed. So you need to speak to them, you need to give them some purpose of why you're doing it. You need to be clear about ensuring that they behave in the way they would normally behave. You're not looking for a right or wrong answer here. You're not doing a checking exercise. You're trying to find improvements and look for differences between the way that people work, or find ways of reducing the non-value adding time. All good things that should make their life easier, as well as improve productivity for yourselves. So please always have a chat to the people. And I think you really have to think about asking for their consent to do it. I don't think I've ever been refused someone's consent on the basis of the way that you speak to them about the purpose of why you're doing it. So we have a user guide and I've got a template. I will send those across to you, or James will send them across to you post the session. So there's something that will take you through the details of what you need to do step by step. So there's a Word document, which is that, you know, practicing what we preached. Neil talked about standard operating procedures. So that's our sort of operating procedure, our user guide for doing an activity sample. So that will take you through that detail. So it talks there about that planning and setup, that, you know, determine area which is good to be observed, determine how many people are going to do that observation. So if you've got a few people who can do the observation, that's useful to do it all at the same time. If for your first view, you might want to double up if you've got the capacity just to try and do it together. So often it's quite useful to have one person just focused on looking at, you know, doing the look away for 10 seconds, looking up after 10 seconds, and then saying what the activity is. And one other person is really controlling the timing and also capturing the detail onto the template. So sometimes it's good for the first few to do that. Once you've done a few, you should be able to observe one person by yourself. You might even be able to observe more than one person at the same time as well. And unfortunately, not like the video, they don't stop. So you need to get the observation down and back to your stopwatch ready for the next one to come along. Agree how long you're going to do it. And in the first instance, it's worth having a watch for a few minutes to see what these activities across the top of the template need to be. So we've got some standard ones there, but you might want to add a few more. I would encourage you not to add loads and loads and loads, because it then becomes really difficult to do the observation. So once you've undertaken, so I'll just pop back to that. Once you've undertaken the observation, so you're just going to stand there, you're going to put the name of the operation, what the date was, the start and the end time, and you're going to look every 10 seconds, and you're just going to do a 5-bar gate in here that looks like that bit down there. A 5-bar gate is just putting a line down. After every 4, you push a line through them to say there's 5. So you will collect this as you go. And so as you'll see in the previous slide, this is what it will look like over a period of time. It gives you a volume of activity at each of those 10-second samples. So the important thing is to do this look away and look towards again. I think it's easy just to stand there watching them rather than putting your head down or looking away from them. So it's important to do that, because I think even during the exercise, it's easy just to preempt what people are doing, or say, oh, just before the 10 seconds, they were doing this. So try and keep yourself to looking away and then looking at the 10-second interval. So you will then have something that looks like this. So this is the results of an actual activity sample we did across 4 pickers. So we looked at 4 pickers, of which actually 2 pickers were considered the fastest and 2 pickers were considered the slower end of picking. So the interesting thing with this is the difference between those good and those not so good on here. From a point of view of, it's the walking and the carrying and moving around, which was the thing that was different between the faster and the slower. So it's not necessarily that the faster can physically pick quicker, there's some opportunities just to homogenize the way that people are doing the work, the way that they are organizing themselves, so that they are carrying the trays, walking less and spending more time doing the operation. So there's quite a considerable difference you'll see between these different pickers in terms of the ways that they're doing the operation in terms of the whole observation. So I think I explained this a bit better here. So these green ones are the faster ones. So you can see, you know, 57% of their time they were doing the operation, and a low percentage of time they were walking or carrying trays. For the slower, which were picker A and picker D, you see that, you know, sort of 10-15% slower, less of their time was spent in the operation, and proportionally more time was spent on those two particular activities. So we can see there's an opportunity not only in the fact that carrying trays, if you look at the top column there, carrying trays and walking were the highest proportion of those things, as was searching for things. We can actually see there's a difference in people's techniques. So actually it's a case of finding which is the best way of doing it. So this was the results of that, that pickers don't necessarily just pick faster, they organize themselves better as well. So as I said, these two fast and slow pickers were identified by the supervisors before we started the activity sample. And they spent, the fast ones spent 15% more of their time on picking than the slower ones. So that 15% is an easier opportunity than maybe some of the other things about how you improve people's actual picking dexterity, etc. So there's some opportunities that come from this that are fairly simpler to fix. And what we were told, it was just that those two pickers, what are they there, the picker B and picker C, were faster, and there was not particular evidence that they were faster, they were just better organized. So does that, in terms of the activity, in terms of the way of doing it, does that make sense? So plan it first, speak to the people, complete the sample over a period of time, observing a number of people if possible, then look at the data to say, what's the distribution of that work and where are the opportunities where people are doing the traditional non-value adds? What's also the opportunities in terms of the difference between different people? And then after that, think about action planning. What can we do about it? So the things that are in action planning are your traditional, you're thinking about, you know, how easy it is to resolve the things and what's the benefit of resolving it. Let me just show you, I'll quickly just take you through the user guide. So can everyone see that user guide? Unless someone says they can't, I'll assume that you all can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll see there, it's got those details in terms of the setting out the categories, setting out your start and end time, and then starting your activity sample. And then looking for those results, and then using this type of matrix. And Neil, have you used this before in terms of the priority matrix?
Yeah, we have. We've been through prioritization matrix. There's a user guide on that one as well.
Yeah, cool. So then looking at using that to say, well, based on the opportunities we've seen, what ideas have we got to fix it? And, you know, what are those things that are going to be easy to do and give us the biggest impact?
You pulled out 2 points. One was confirmation bias. Just be wary of that. I've done it a few times myself where I've suspected there's too much walking in the operation, in the process, and I found myself sort of like anticipating the movements and trying to anticipate when somebody was going to start walking, and therefore skewing the results. So having two people do it is a good way of separating that confirmation bias, because you've got one person who does the observation, one person who writes it down. So that's definitely one thing on that I was going to bring up. And then the other one as well is it's another good way of identifying opportunities for process improvement in things like layouts. So when we did this before, we identified the amount of time spent waiting at weigh stations to tip the fruit, the position of the weigh stations and where they were in relation to the pick face. So as well as like what David was illustrating in terms of where the people organise themselves, it might well be that there's some process problems as well that can be resolved by improving the layout of the operation itself as well. So I think they were the 2 points I wanted to add in, but I think you've covered it really, really well, David. I'll tell you, there's one thing I've done which can help overcome that observational bias where people behave differently when they know you're watching them. I've actually put a video on a tripod. I've set it up, especially if you've got people working in a close proximity, they're all working in one particular area. I've set the video up and I've just left it there for a good 3 or 4 hours. So people are used to it. They're not frightened or scared by it, and it's been going on for so long that they haven't been able to change the way they behave. And then after that, I've turned the video on for an hour, and then I've gone back and I've looked at the 1 hour, and I've took a 20-minute random time slot out of that 1 hour video, and I've carried out my observations on that, and that just helps reduce down that observational bias that you might sometimes can get.
Yeah.
So just a quick summary. So this is a detailed analysis of the activity to show other opportunities to reduce non-value add. It very well complements the waste walks you've already done, but just from a different lens. Works particularly well in those high volume, high labour activities where the improvement, obviously, if you make a small change, that improvement is multiplied. It's the frequencies of activities within a work system, and you're doing that by taking samples. So the important thing is we've talked about all those biases and taking those snapshots and trying to look away and all of those things so you get an accurate representation. Spend the time planning it out, do some sort of quick testing of it, see how you get on, have a look at the analysis, and then do some action planning. It's all in the instructions if you choose to have a go at doing it. So our next session is we're going to look at problem solving. About once we get some of these things in terms of opportunities where we see things could be better, we'll go through some techniques for looking about how you might look to solve problems.